It is Talk 0344 499 1000. Now, widespread protests are shaking Iran as economic collapse and a plunging currency fuel unrest across dozens of cities. There are chants against the clerical leadership, clashes, violent clashes, rising deaths as well, prompting calls for dialogue even as authorities crack down. Let's speak to Potkin Azarmehr, British-Iranian journalist, senior fellow, investigative project on terrorism. Good afternoon to you, Potkin. Nice to have you with us. Just take us back on this then, if you would, because I know there's huge scenes we're seeing play out in Iran, and I'm sure it's maybe specific areas, I don't know. But what's the root of this? How did this begin? What has gone wrong?
Good afternoon, Ian. It's good to be on your show. I've been writing and saying for at least 2 years that the regime's Achilles heel is the economy. It's something that they cannot fix. So what happened at the start of the protest, you had these shopkeepers, mainly people that were importing mobile phones and exchange dealers. And because of the fluctuation in the foreign currency, because they just can't predict what's happening, the price of what they were importing, it was just going up. They couldn't sell it. So they went on a protest. And let me make something clear. You know, this sector is not exactly very popular with the population. I mean, They blame this sector for a lot of the abuse of the preferential foreign currency rate, for example. But it was an opportunity for them to come out. And, you know, they haven't come out in support of those shopkeepers in particular. They just saw an opportunity to express their dissatisfaction with the economy.
So it was a catalyst for a wider disquiet.
Exactly. It sparked the wider protest. Now, if you ask me on Friday and Saturday, I would, how the protests are going, I would say the regime's still in control. And I had two litmus tests for that. One, because the Friday prayers went ahead as usual. Mm-hmm. And then also Saturday they were planning this big celebration to mark the birthday of the first Shia Imam, Imam Ali, in more than 100 points throughout Tehran and other cities with various artists performing. And that went ahead uninterrupted as well. But Saturday, Maduro's arrest is a game changer.
Interesting.
And yesterday we saw at least in one city in Malik Shahi in West Iran, which is only a small town. It's got a population of about 7,500 families, 50,000. The protesters were trying to go towards an IRGC, a Revolutionary Guards barracks, to disarm it, and then they were gunned down. So the situation is changing by the minute. I mean, I thought I'm going to have some rest after the New Year celebrations in there, but I haven't had any kip since because the situation is changing by the minute.
People protest, of course, all over the world with different kind of results. We know that these protests have turned violent in places. Are they likely to continue? Will the regime double down and put a stop to this, or are we likely to see some fundamental change here?
Okay, there's some differences between these protests and the previous protests. And there's also some differences in the way the regime has tried to handle it. I mean, apart from what happened in Malik Shahi, at least in the big cities, the crackdown has not been as violent as compared to the previous. I'm not saying they weren't violent. I'm saying that the crackdown has not been as heavy as the previous protests. Yeah. For some reason, they haven't shut down the internet either. I think it's probably because that would damage the economy further, and it's not something that they want to do at the moment. But I think the one difference between these protests and the previous ones is that before, in the previous protests, the regime was confident that it can bring the protest to an end. This time, it knows it doesn't have an answer how to fix the economy. Yeah. It may have short-term solutions. All they can do is delay the collapse. But there's no long-term solution. I mean, immediately after the protest started, they came up with this special plan to give more subsidies and to give what they call kala bag, which is like coupons for commodity, you can translate it to. So people's purchasing power is sort of like strengthened as a bribe to the protesters. But even since the head of the central bank changed, there's been a further fall in the Iranian currency. Yeah. So I think this is what's really worrying them, is that they don't have a long-term solution. The economy cannot be fixed unless the Islamic Republic changes completely into to a sense that we can't even call it the Islamic Republic anymore.
Indeed. I mean, you've got inflation around about 42%, food inflation above 70%. I mean, these are huge figures, of course. Obviously, Iran doesn't function like a Western democracy does in that sense. Is there, having said that, an opposition person standing in the wings saying, I could solve this?
Right. This has been the problem with Iran. This is why this archaic regime has managed to last more than 45 years, because there hasn't been a strong, viable, proper opposition to the regime. And I don't mean an opposition that's not vocal outside Iran. I mean, the opposition doesn't have a physical structure underground in Iran. I mean, if I compare it with 1979 revolution, Khomeini was in exile, but he had a physical structure underground throughout Iran. There were the mosques that, every town, every village had mosques, and that was like his physical network. So if he said to people, come out on the streets, these mosques would then mobilize the people and organize them. And he had these schools that he'd invested to. Many of the current officials are graduates of those schools. So, and then shortly towards the end of the, 1 month to the end of the revolution, you had the revolutionary committees that were set up that were literally running the day-to-day things, the policing, the traffic control, et cetera, et cetera. That physical structure is missing. However, the one advantage that this protests have compared to the previous ones, whereas previous ones were completely spontaneous and no organization, because the shopkeepers started this, the shopkeepers have a guild, right? So that brings some sort of organization to the protests. However, the other side of it is that the regime can then meet with the representatives of the guilds, and he already has done with some of the ones that I know, and then try to reach a deal with them. But what we have to say is whether the protests have gone beyond that, beyond the control of the shopkeepers guilds, and whether these bribes are going to work.
Yeah. I mean, this is not going to finish by the weekend, right? You're predicting that this will continue for some time.
Well, it's continuing in the small towns. It hasn't really made a major impact in the big cities to the extent that you could say the regime has lost control. In the smaller towns, in the more remote towns, it's easier to organize, because being a small town, people know each other, so they can organize, they can inform each other. It's much more difficult in a bigger town. But as you said, it hasn't gone away yet. So look, you can't predict revolutions. You just don't know what's going to happen. And I don't want to make a prediction now, because things change by the minute. Tomorrow we could be in a completely different situation. However, I keep reiterating that in the long run, in the long term, the collapse seems to be imminent, because they cannot fix the economy. That is the Achilles heel of the regime.
They are literally, there is no easy fix on this, or any fix at all.
And we've seen this with other totalitarian regimes, like, for example, with Russia or with China. I mean, there's different outcomes to this. Either you can have a revolution, or you can have a collapse, or you can just, the regimes could evolve into something different, like they did in China.
Potkin, keep in touch. We will speak again and see where this story goes. Potkin Azarmehr, who's a British-Iranian journalist, with details of what is going on there. It could get, this might turn another corner. Who knows? Is it plateauing out? But as he said, the clerical leadership there there's really no answer to this, and fueled somewhat by what happened in Venezuela. And what happened in Venezuela, of course, then fuels another discussion about Greenland. Mark